Alex's hand remained remarkably steady as she approached table 7, a champagne bottle in her grasp. She was acutely aware that she shouldn't be here. Not in this particular restaurant, certainly not serving this specific table, and absolutely not within breathing distance of a man whose family might very well have orchestrated her brother's demise. El Santuario shimmered, resembling a jewel box crafted to conceal grim secrets. Crystal chandeliers cast fractured light across pristine white linens. The air was thick with the aroma of truffle oil and expensive perfume, mingling with a subtle undercurrent of danger that her survival instincts immediately recognized. Dressed in a perfectly tailored tuxedo, Mattia Greco occupied the table's center like a statue carved from marble. His dark suit was impeccably fitted, his black hair swept back, revealing features that suggested an understanding that beauty and cruelty weren't mutually exclusive. What was most unnerving was his stillness. While his fiancée laughed and her parents gesticulated, he simply observed, calculated. Alex had encountered predators before, but this man was more than just dangerous. He was inevitability draped in Italian wool. She poured champagne, her server's smile fixed in place, the kind of expression that conveyed, "I'm here to refill your glass and I cease to exist beyond that function." 5 years of practice had honed her skill at disappearing in plain sight. Valentina Russo's hand rested possessively on Mattia's forearm, the diamond on her finger easily worth the price of a small country. Everything about her screamed, old money merging with new power. Isn't this romantic? My parents flew in from Boston just for tonight, Valentina said, her voice dripping honey and poison. Senator Russo beamed, a man with silver hair, an expensive suit, and hands that had likely signed both bills and death warrants with equal ease. His wife was a perfect match, radiating calculated warmth, clad in a designer dress, her posture impeccable, her eyes assessing Alex for precisely 2 seconds before dismissing her as utterly irrelevant. Then Alex noticed the tattoo on Valentina's inner wrist, 3 stars arranged in a triangle, a dagger piercing the center, the unmistakable mark of the Costa Syndicate, the Spanish Mafia. A wave of icy dread washed over Alex. That symbol. She'd seen it in Noah's files, circled in red ink, connected by arrows to documents detailing territory disputes, political corruption, and bodies that turned up in the East River. Her brother had been investigating the Costa Syndicate's infiltration of New York's political infrastructure when he died, tracing connections between Senator Russo's campaign finances and Spanish oligarchs with ties to organized crime. Now, his daughter was about to marry into New York's most notorious crime family. This wasn't a merger. It was a hostile takeover. Valentina's hand casually drifted below the table, her fingers finding something concealed within the folds of her dress. Something small, hard, and unmistakably metallic. Across the restaurant, a man in a server's uniform stood too rigidly near the kitchen entrance, while another lingered by the emergency exit, their posture unnatural, their attention fixed too intently on table 7. This wasn't an engagement dinner. It was a kill box. Careful Mattia's voice cut through her rising panic, deep, controlled, with an edge of barely suppressed violence. That's $1,000 bottle. Alex steadied her hands through sheer force of will. My apologies, sir, she replied. His eyes locked onto hers, black as midnight, missing absolutely nothing. She felt pinned in place by that gaze, dissected, evaluated, catalogued as either a threat or irrelevant in the space of a heartbeat. You're new, he said, not as a question, but as an observation. For months, sir, she replied. His head tilted almost imperceptibly, a movement that reminded her of a wolf scenting prey. What's your name? He asked. Alex, the lie came automatically. Everything else about her identity had been buried 5 years ago when Noah died, and she'd learned that asking the wrong questions could get you killed. Alex, he tested the word as if tasting wine. You seem nervous. Valentina's laugh sliced through the tension. Mattia, darling, you're making her uncomfortable. Let the poor girl work. But he didn't look away. Am I making you uncomfortable, Alex? No, sir, she replied. I'm just focused on providing excellent service. Something flickered in his expression. Amusement, perhaps, or recognition of a lie well told. Outside the window, across the street, a flash of movement on a rooftop. Sniper. Alex's training from another life kicked in. Noah had taught her to read situations. Violence always telegraphed itself in the seconds before it erupted. You just had to know what to look for. She had perhaps 10 seconds before the world exploded. Mattia raised his glass to toast Senator Russo, his expression calm, completely unaware that he was about to die. Alex moved on instinct, stepping close enough to pour his wine, close enough to smell bergamot and smoke cologne, close enough to see the faint scar along his jawline. She leaned in, her lips nearly brushing his ear, her voice barely a whisper. Run now. For one heartbeat he went utterly still. Then his hand shot out, seizing her wrist with crushing force. His body coiled like a spring about to unleash. His eyes locked onto hers with an intensity that stole her breath. Who sent you? The window shattered. Welcome back, my beautiful souls and kindred spirits, a voice announced. Before we start, go ahead and subscribe, like, and share where you're watching from. It always warms my heart to see our little storytelling family stretch across the world. Every click, every comment, every bit of love you give helps us keep uncovering these unforgettable stories together. So find your quiet place. Settle in, and let me take you somewhere you've never been before. Mattia moved with the speed and precision of violence given form. He flipped the table with one hand while dragging Alex down with the other. Crystal exploded. Wine splattered like blood. Valentina's mother screamed. Gunfire erupted from multiple directions. The fake servers produced automatic weapons. The senator's security detail returned fire. Chaos bloomed like roses in candlelight. Beautiful, terrible, and absolutely lethal. Mattia's hand never relinquished its grip on Alex's wrist. He pulled her toward the kitchen, his body shielding hers, his movements precise despite the pandemonium. Guards materialized beside them, forming a protective wedge, pushing through the screaming crowd. The kitchen was a scene of stainless steel, fire, and shouting, chefs diving for cover. Mattia didn't slow down. He kicked open a service door and pulled Alex into a narrow corridor that reeked of garbage and rain. Behind them, the restaurant sounded like a war zone. Glass shattering, people screaming, the sharp crack of gunfire echoing off marble walls. Move! His voice was cold as winter. His hand still gripped her wrist like iron. She stumbled after him, her server shoes slipping on the wet pavement, her mind struggling to process what had just happened. They burst into an alley, rain hammering down from a black sky. The car waited, engine running, doors open. One of the guards took the driver's seat. Mattia shoved Alex into the back and followed, slamming the door as the vehicle peeled out with enough force to slam her against the leather. The guard in the passenger seat spoke rapid Italian into his phone. Blood seeped through his jacket sleeve. Mattia leaned forward, completely focused, giving orders in that same controlled voice he'd used when asking for wine. Who sent you? He turned that predatory attention back to Alex, his hand now holding a gun. When had he drawn it? It was pointed casually at her midsection. Answer carefully. I just saved your life by listening to you. Give me a reason not to reconsider that decision. Rain hammered the windshield as the car screamed through Manhattan's side streets. Alex's dress uniform clung to her skin where Mattia had dragged her through the downpour. Her wrist throbbed where his fingers had gripped hard enough to leave marks. No one sent me, she replied, her voice coming out steadier than her heartbeat. I recognized them, the Russos. I knew what was about to happen. How? The word landed like a knife. Because I've seen that setup before, she said, meeting his eyes, refusing to flinch. Your fiancée had a weapon. Her security weren't security. They were positioned for a kill box. And there was a sniper on the building across the street. Mattia's expression didn't change. He glanced at the guard in the passenger seat. Confirm. The man listened to his phone, then nodded. 3 shooters on the adjacent rooftop. Professional-grade rifles. Valentina Russo is missing. Her family claims they were attacked too. The senator's already spinning it for the media. Attempted assassination by a rival family. Of course he is. Madia's jaw tightened almost imperceptibly. The first real emotion Alex had seen crack through that marble facade. How many dead? 2 civilians, 3 of theirs, 1 of ours. The guard's voice dropped. Luca didn't make it. Silence filled the car like a physical presence. The driver took another corner hard enough to make the tires scream. Through the rain-streaked window, Alex caught glimpses of the city blurring past. Neon signs reflecting in puddles. Late-night crowds scattering. Madia's attention returned to her with surgical focus. You knew about the snipers, about the positioning. That's not casual observation. That's training. I pay attention, she replied, her throat feeling like sandpaper. Keeps me alive. Paying attention doesn't teach you tactical assessment. His thumb traced the gun's safety. A casual gesture that carried more threat than most people's direct violence. Who are you really, Alex? The name she'd given him felt suddenly fragile. A paper shield against a man who probably had the resources to peel away every identity she'd built in the last 5 years. I'm a waitress trying to survive in a city that eats people like me, she said, holding his gaze. I saw something wrong, and I made a choice. That's all. No, he said, leaning closer, the gun never wavering. That's not all. You recognized Valentina's family specifically. You identified their security as hostile before the first shot was fired. And you warned me instead of running. Those aren't the actions of a waitress trying to survive. Thunder cracked overhead. The car turned onto a bridge. Below them, the East River churned, black and lethal. My brother was a journalist. The truth came out before she could stop it. He investigated political corruption. 5 years ago, he was killed in a car accident. That wasn't an accident. Before he died, he sent me files, evidence, connections between the Russo family and Spanish organized crime. I've been trying to understand what he found ever since. Madia's expression didn't change, but something shifted in his posture. What was your brother's name? Noah Madison. Recognition flashed across his face, brief but unmistakable. The guard in the passenger seat turned to look at her with new interest. Noah Madison. Madia's voice went very quiet. The investigative reporter who was researching my family's connections to political corruption, who died when his car went off a bridge during a rainstorm. Yes. Alex's chest felt tight. You knew him? I knew of him. Madia lowered the gun fractionally. He reached out to my people 6 months before he died. Said he had evidence of corruption that went to the highest levels of New York's power structure. He said he wanted to make a deal, information in exchange for protection. What happened? My father refused. Said Madison was a liability, that cooperating with journalists was bad for business. Madia's jaw tightened. 3 months later, your brother drove off the Queensboro Bridge in a storm. The investigation ruled it an accident. Very neat, very convenient. He didn't drink. Alex's voice broke despite her effort to control it. Noah would never have driven drunk. I know. Madia's tone carried something that might have been regret, which is why I always assumed someone killed him. The car pulled into an underground garage. Concrete pillars stretched into shadow. The driver cut the engine, but nobody moved. Rain drummed on the roof like fingers tapping out a countdown. Madia studied her for a long moment. Then he holstered his gun. You saved my life tonight, Alex Madison. That buys you temporary asylum. But understand this, you're not safe anymore. Valentina's people saw you warn me. Security footage probably caught it, which means both the Costa Syndicate and my own organization are going to want answers about who you are and what you know. Then why keep me alive? Because you're the only person in this city who told me the truth when lying would have been safer. His voice dropped to something almost gentle. That makes you either very brave or very stupid. I haven't decided which yet. He opened the car door and extended his hand to Alex. She stared at it for a heartbeat. This offering from a man whose world had killed her brother. Then she took it because the alternative was dying alone in the rain. Welcome to my war, Alex Madison. Madia's voice carried across the garage like a promise and a threat. Let's hope you survive it. The safe house was a penthouse in a building that didn't officially exist on any city records. Madia led her through a service elevator that required 3 different codes and a palm print to operate. The guard, whose name she learned was Marco, swept each floor as they ascended, weapon ready. Alex's clothes had dried into uncomfortable stiffness. Her feet ached from running in server shoes. Her wrist throbbed where Mattia's grip had left finger-shaped bruises. But she kept her spine straight and her expression neutral because showing weakness in this world was the fastest way to become prey. The penthouse opened into a space that looked like it belonged in an architecture magazine. Floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking Manhattan's glittering skyline, minimalist furniture in shades of black and gray. Everything was pristine, impersonal, and carefully designed to reveal nothing about the man who owned it. Sit, Mattia gestured to a leather couch. Don't touch anything. Don't move unless I tell you to. Marco will be outside the door. Am I a guest or a prisoner? You're alive, his tone suggested that should be answer enough. Stay that way by following instructions. He disappeared into another room. Alex heard water running, drawers opening and closing, the quiet efficiency of someone who'd performed this post-crisis routine 100 times before. She moved to the window despite his orders. Below, the city sprawled in neon and shadow, millions of people living their lives, completely unaware that in a restaurant across town, people had died tonight. You don't follow instructions well, Mattia's voice came from behind her. He changed into dark jeans and a black shirt, his wetsuit replaced. He carried a first aid kit in one hand and 2 glasses of amber liquid in the other. That's going to be a problem if you want to survive the next 48 hours. I needed to see the city to remind myself it's still there. Why wouldn't it be? Because sometimes when your world explodes, you forget other people's worlds keep spinning. She accepted the glass he offered. What is this? Whiskey. Drink it. You're in shock, whether you realize it or not. She took a sip. The burn grounded her, pulled her back into her body. Mattia set the first aid kit on the coffee table and gestured to the couch. Alex sat this time, too exhausted to argue. He knelt in front of her and reached for her wrist. She flinched reflexively. He paused, his dark eyes meeting hers with unexpected patience. I need to see the bruising. I might have grabbed you too hard in the chaos. The gentleness in his voice was somehow more unsettling than the gun had been. She extended her arm. His fingers were careful now, turning her wrist to examine the purple marks blooming across her skin. His touch was clinical, professional, but she felt it everywhere. Nothing broken, he said. He applied gel with surprising care. You'll bruise, but it'll fade in a few days. Any other injuries? Just my pride and my career. I'm guessing waitressing at Isla Santuario isn't an option anymore. His mouth quirked almost imperceptibly. No, you're effectively dead to your old life as of tonight. Alex, the waitress ceased to exist the moment you warned me. The question is, who do you become next? The television mounted on the wall suddenly flickered to life. Marco must have turned it on from somewhere. News footage filled the screen. Shaky cell phone video from Isla Santuario, the chaos of the attack, people screaming, glass shattering. And there, crystal clear, was Alex leaning close to Mattia seconds before the shooting started. The news anchor's voice cut through. Authorities are seeking this woman for questioning in connection with tonight's attack on the Greco family. Sources close to the investigation suggest she may have been working with the assailants. Mattia muted it. They're already spinning the narrative. By morning, you'll be a terrorist, a radical. The Costa Syndicate is very good at controlling stories. Alex's reflection stared back from the dark TV screen. A stranger's face. Someone dangerous. Someone hunted. Everything she'd worked so hard to avoid for 5 years had materialized in a single evening. I can't go back. The words came out hollow. To my apartment, my other jobs, anyone who knew me. It's all gone. Yes. Mattia moved beside her, his shoulder nearly touching hers. Welcome to being dead. It's lonely at first. Then it becomes freedom. Because when you don't exist, you can become anyone. Is that what you are? A ghost? I've been dying by inches since I was old enough to understand what my family really did. His voice dropped to something raw. Tonight was just making it official. Alex turned to him, really looked at him for the first time since they'd fled the restaurant. She saw the exhaustion beneath the control, the grief he was too disciplined to show, the weight of carrying a legacy built on corpses. I don't trust anyone who looks calm in the dark, she said quietly. But you don't look calm. You look like you belong to it. Like the darkness is the only place you've ever been able to breathe. Maybe because you're there with me. His hand came up to cup her face, the gesture achingly gentle despite the violence humming beneath his skin. Maybe because, for the first time in my life, I'm not alone in it. His thumb traced her cheekbone. She should pull away, should remember that this man's family had refused to help her brother, should protect herself the way she'd learned to protect herself for 5 years. Instead, she leaned into his touch because sometimes survival wasn't about being smart. Sometimes it was about choosing which risks were worth taking. You're not safe anymore, waitress, he murmured, his forehead touching hers. You just joined my war. Outside, the storm raged. Inside, something dangerous sparked between them. Two damaged people recognizing each other in the dark, choosing alliance over safety, choosing each other despite every reason not to. And somewhere in the city, the people who tried to kill them were already planning their next move. The safe house felt different in the gray light of almost dawn. Less like a sanctuary and more like a cage lined with expensive things. Alex stood at the window, watching the city transform from darkness to hesitant mourning. While behind her, Madia's team worked in that focused silence that came from years of operating in shadows. She couldn't shake the image from the security footage. Noah falling, Don Greco walking away, the casual brutality of it, the way her brother's body had crumpled like a puppet with cut strings. 5 years. She'd spent 5 years running from a truth she hadn't even known existed, had built an entire identity around being invisible when the real monster had been hiding in plain sight the whole time. Her reflection stared back from the glass. Same face, different woman. The Alex who'd poured champagne at El Santuario last night had died somewhere between the gunfire and the revelation. What remained was something harder, something that tasted like her brother's memory and her own carefully buried rage. Behind her, she heard Mattia giving orders in Italian. His voice had that same controlled precision it always carried, but she could hear the fractures underneath, could recognize the sound of someone holding themselves together through sheer force of will because falling apart wasn't an option yet. The specialist with purple hair approached. Miss Madison, I found something else in the files. Something separate from the financial records. Alex turned. Show me. The woman led her to a laptop displaying a folder labeled Project Noah. Alex's breath caught. She clicked it open with fingers that wanted to shake but didn't. Documents filled the screen. Correspondence between her brother and someone identified only as MG. Meeting notes, surveillance photos, a carefully constructed investigation into the Russo family's political connections, and at the bottom, a contract signed by both Noah Madison and Mattia Greco. Alex read it once, then again, then a third time because her brain refused to process what her eyes were seeing. Noah had been working for Mattia, not investigating him, working with him as a paid informant, providing intelligence on Senator Russo's criminal activities in exchange for protection and financial support. The room tilted. She gripped the edge of the desk. When? Her voice came out rough. When was this signed? The specialist checked the metadata. 8 months before your brother died. 8 months. Noah had spent 8 months secretly working with the Greco family, had taken their money, had provided them with information, had trusted them to keep him safe, and then Don Greco had murdered him. You knew? Alex's voice cut through the room like broken glass. Every head turned. Mattia's eyes found hers across the space. You knew my brother. You worked with him, and you let me stand here thinking I didn't know until tonight. Mattia moved toward her. Slow, careful, like approaching something wounded and dangerous. My father kept this from me. Noah reached out to me directly, yes, but I thought the deal fell through. I thought he'd changed his mind. I didn't know my father had intercepted our arrangement. Didn't know he'd taken the meeting himself. You're lying. But even as she said it, Alex wasn't sure, because the devastation on Mattia's face when that video had played, that hadn't been fake, that had been the sound of someone's world shattering. I'm not. He stopped an arm's length away, close enough to touch, far enough to run. Noah was supposed to be my informant, my way of building a case against the Costa Syndicate's infiltration of New York politics. He was going to help me take down Senator Russo from the inside while maintaining plausible deniability for both of us. It was a clean play, a smart play, the kind of alliance that could have changed everything. Then what happened? My father found out. Madia's jaw tightened. He'd been monitoring my communications, saw the contract, realized I was building something independent of his control. So, he intercepted Noah's next message, set up a meeting, and eliminated the problem. The problem being my brother, the problem being me trying to operate outside his authority. His voice dropped. Noah died because I thought I could outmaneuver my father, because I believed I was smart enough to build something better while he wasn't paying attention. I was wrong, and your brother paid for my arrogance. Alex wanted to rage at him, wanted to blame him for Noah's death, because anger was easier than grief, and having a target was simpler than accepting that her brother had died in the crossfire of someone else's family drama. But she'd seen the video, had watched Don Greco pull that trigger, had heard him say that Noah was a liability. Madia hadn't killed her brother, but his father had. And in some ways that was worse because it meant the man standing in front of her was both her enemy's son. And her brother's would-be ally was not only complicit in the very system that had destroyed Noah, but also the only person with the power to bring that system crashing down. Why didn't you tell me? Her voice wavered despite her best efforts to keep it steady. When you figured out who I was, when you realized I was Noah Madison's sister, why didn't you say something? Because I didn't know if I could trust you. His honesty was brutal in its simplicity. I didn't know if you were working with the Costa Syndicate, if you'd been sent to infiltrate my organization, if your warning at the restaurant was genuine or part of some larger scheme. I had to be absolutely certain before I revealed how much your brother factored into my plans. And now, Madia's voice turned icy cold. Now I know Don Greco is still alive. Now I know he's been pulling the strings of both families from behind the scenes. Now I know the engagement to Valentina was his idea. Her voice dripped with disdain. The assassination attempt was his test. He wanted to see if I'd survive, if I was strong enough to be worthy of inheriting his empire. And when I did survive, when you warned me, he pivoted to Plan B, which is making me prove my loyalty by choosing the family over everything else, over justice, over truth, over... He cut himself off, the implication hanging heavy in the air, over anything that might make me weak in his eyes. Alex moved to the window again, her gaze fixed on the cityscape. Dawn had fully broken, painting the buildings in soft light. The city looked pristine, almost innocent, as if it had no idea the depravity that festered in its underbelly. There's something else. Salvatore stepped forward, holding out a tablet. The encrypted drive had another layer of security. Financial records going back 20 years. Don Greco's been funding political assassinations with Russo money since before Senator Russo even held office. The Costa Syndicate connection isn't new. It's been there from the start. He swiped through files, showcasing dates, names, and amounts. A meticulously crafted paper trail that illustrated how two families, one Italian and one Spanish, had gradually intertwined their operations until the distinction between them was virtually non-existent. And at the center of it all, orchestrating every move, was Don Greco. He's not just a crime lord, Alex said, her voice devoid of inflection. He's the architect. He built this entire structure. The Russos, the Costa Syndicate, the political corruption, it all traces back to him. Matthias's reflection appeared beside hers in the glass. Yes. My father doesn't just run the Greco family. He runs New York. Every family, every politician, every dirty cop, and corrupt judge. He's the spider at the center of the web. And he's been grooming me my entire life to take his place. But you don't want it. I want to burn it all to ash. The words were spoken softly, but with absolute conviction. I want to obliterate everything he built. Every alliance, every corrupt deal, every blood-soaked dollar. I want to salt the earth where his empire stood and build something clean on top of it. That's a noble dream. Alex turned to face him. But dreams don't survive contact with reality. Your father's too powerful, too connected. He spent decades building this system. You think you can just tear it down because you're tired of it? No. His eyes locked onto hers. I think we can tear it down together because you have something I don't. What's that? Nothing left to lose. His hand gently cupped her face. the gesture surprisingly tender given the barely suppressed violence that simmered beneath his surface. You've already lost your brother, your old life, your sense of security. You're not afraid of consequences because the worst has already happened. That makes you the most dangerous person in this room. Or it makes me reckless. But she didn't flinch from his touch, didn't back away. She remained rooted to the spot as a dangerous spark ignited between them. Then be reckless with me. His thumb traced her cheekbone, his eyes searching hers. Help me finish what Noah started. Help me expose every corrupt connection, every dirty politician, every crime family masquerading as legitimate. Help me burn down my father's legacy and build something that would make your brother proud. And then what? After the burning, after the blood? What happens to us? I don't know. His forehead rested against hers. I've never thought beyond mere survival before. Never imagined a future that didn't involve dying in my father's shadow. But standing here with you, knowing that you chose to save me when letting me die would have been the safer option, I want to find out. Alex closed her eyes. She allowed herself to feel the weight of his presence, the warmth of his hand, the steady rhythm of his breathing. She allowed herself to imagine, just for a moment, what it might be like to stop running, to stop hiding, to stop living as if every day were her last. Then she opened her eyes and met his gaze. Your father dies by your hand. Her voice was hard as steel. Not by a soldier, not by an accident, not by some coward's poison. You look him in the eyes, and you make him understand what he took from you. From Noah. From everyone he's ever destroyed. That's non-negotiable. Something flickered in Matthias's expression. Perhaps respect. Or perhaps recognition of a kindred spirit who understood that some debts could only be repaid in blood. Agreed. His hand dropped away. But first, we need leverage. Evidence so damning that even if we die, the truth will survive. Insurance that keeps us breathing long enough to get close to him. The files are a start, but we need more. We need witnesses, testimony. Something that directly links him to Noah's murder in a way that can't be dismissed or buried. The specialist raised her hand. The video file had metadata, security camera designation, location stamps. If we can access the original system, we might find other footage, maybe audio, maybe proof of premeditation. That parking garage is owned by one of my father's shell companies. Matthias was already moving, already formulating a plan. The security footage would have been wiped, but the backup servers, those might still have copies. They're stored off-site in a location that only 3 people know about. Alex followed him, her mind racing. Let me guess. You're one of them. I'm his heir. I know where all the bodies are buried. His smile was sharp, both literally and figuratively. The question is whether we can reach the servers before he realizes we're hunting for them. Salvatore was already pulling up maps. The backup facility is in the Red Hook warehouse district. Technically abandoned, but maintained as a data storage site. Limited security, mostly automated systems, which means my father will know the instant we access it. Matthias studied the screen, his brow furrowed in thought. He'll have built-in alarms, fail-safes, ways to ensure he knows when someone's digging through his archives. So, we create a distraction. Alex's mind was already leaping ahead. Something big enough to divert his attention away from a quiet data breach. What kind of distraction? He looked at her, at the man whose engagement dinner had turned into a bloodbath, at the heir to an empire built on corpses, at the only person in New York who might be crazy enough to do what needed to be done. Me. The word came out clear, resolute. I'm the distraction. The waitress who warned you. The woman whose face is all over the news as a person of interest in the attack. I'm exactly the kind of problem your father needs to address personally. Absolutely not. Matthias's voice was firm. You're not putting yourself in his crosshairs. I'm already there. We both know he's looking for me, that every minute I'm alive is a threat to his carefully constructed narrative. So we give him what he wants. We let him find me. And then he kills you. Not if I'm wearing a wire. Not if I can get him talking. Not if I can make him confess on tape. Alex stepped closer, her gaze unwavering. Your father's arrogant. He thinks he's untouchable. If I show up scared and desperate and willing to make a deal, he'll want to gloat. Criminals always want their victims to know how brilliant they were, how thoroughly they've been defeated. You're talking about using yourself as bait in a trap that might not even work. I'm talking about finishing what my brother started. Her voice dropped, laced with a deep-seated resolve. Noah tried to expose your father and died for it. I'm not making the same mistake. I'm going in prepared, protected, with backup and an exit strategy. But I am going in because this ends now, tonight, before more people die. Silence settled over the room. The team watched, their expressions a mixture of concern and grim determination. Salvatore's face suggested he thought she was insane, but respected her strategy. The specialist looked torn between admiration and horror. Matthias stared at her for a long moment, his eyes searching, assessing. Then he turned to Salvatore. How fast can you get a wire set up that won't be detected? 2 hours, maybe less if I call in some favors. Do it, and get me blueprints of my father's estate. Every entrance, every exit, every blind spot in his security. If this goes sideways, I want extraction options. He looked back at Alex, his expression unreadable. You're not doing this alone. I'll be close. The moment something feels wrong, you abort and I come in. He'll recognize you, not if I'm properly disguised. A cold smile touched his lips. My father taught me how to disappear. Time to use those lessons against him. The next 2 hours became a blur of preparation. Salvatore returned with the equipment, a wire so small it could be sewn into Alex's clothing, making it nearly impossible to detect. A panic button disguised as a button on her jacket, and a tracker no bigger than a grain of rice that could be swallowed if necessary. You press this, we come in guns hot. Salvatore demonstrated the panic button, his voice leaving no room for argument. No hesitation, no questions. You signal distress, and we extract you by any means necessary. Understood? Understood. Matthias reappeared, transformed. He wore worn jeans, a leather jacket, his hair styled differently. Contacts changed his eye color from dark brown to hazel, and a slight prosthetic subtly altered the shape of his nose. It wasn't a perfect disguise, but it was enough to sow doubt, enough to allow him to get close without being immediately recognized. Your father will figure it out eventually, Alex observed, studying him intently. Even disguised, he knows how you move, how you think. By the time he figures it out, you'll already be wired and talking. The evidence will already be recording. Matthias checked his weapon, his movements precise and deliberate. And if he tries to hurt you, the disguise won't matter. I'll put a bullet between his eyes, regardless of the consequences. The plan crystallized. Alex would surrender herself at a known Greco front, a restaurant in Little Italy where Don Greco frequently conducted business. She would claim to have information about the ill-fated Santorio attack, about who had truly orchestrated it. She'd play scared, desperate, willing to trade everything she knew for protection. Don Greco would take the meeting because he was a predator who couldn't resist the opportunity to toy with his prey, because he'd want to know what she knew, and because eliminating her would tie up a loose end. And while he was focused on her, while he was monologuing about his brilliance, the wire would be recording. Salvatore's team would be breaking into the Red Hook facility, and Matthias would be close enough to intervene if everything went wrong. It was a terrible plan, the kind of plan that could get everyone killed, but it was also the only plan that might actually work. Last chance to back out. Matthias stood by the door, his expression unreadable. The car was ready, the team was positioned, and the sun had fully risen, painting the city in a golden light that felt like a cruel joke. We do this, there's no going back. My father dies or we do. Those are the only outcomes. Alex thought about Noah, about 5 years of running, about living in the shadows while the people who destroyed her family walked free, about the security footage showing her brother's murder, and about the cold, casual way Don Greco had pulled that trigger. I'm not backing out. She adjusted the wire, feeling its slight weight against her skin. A technological ghost recording the truth. I'm finishing this. For Noah, for Antonio, for everyone your father has ever destroyed. Then let's go to war. Matthias opened the door. They descended into the city, into the bright morning that felt so wrong for what they were about to do. They traveled down through the underground garage and into separate vehicles because arriving together would raise suspicion. Alex rode with Salvatore, while Matthias took his own car with Marco. The rest of the team dispersed to their designated positions, engaging in digital infiltration, establishing physical backup, and ensuring escape routes were mapped and memorized. The city hummed around them, filled with people going to work, living normal lives, completely unaware that in a restaurant in Little Italy, a woman was about to sit down with a monster and try to make him confess to murder. "You're braver than your brother," Salvatore said quietly, breaking the silence. Noah was smart, dedicated, but he approached this like an investigation, like gathering evidence was enough. "You understand what he didn't, that some fights require blood." "I'm not brave." Alex watched Manhattan blur past, her thoughts swirling. "I'm just tired of being afraid." "That's the same thing." The restaurant was called Bella Notte. Elegant. Expensive. The kind of place where deals were brokered over wine and pasta while bodyguards stood discreetly by the exits. Alex had walked past it 100 times during her years of hiding in the city, never imagining she'd one day walk through its doors. She entered alone, head held high despite the frantic beating of her heart. The maitre d' scrutinized her with a practiced gaze that came from years of identifying potential threats. "I'm here to see Don Greco," she announced, her voice steady. "Tell him Alex Madison would like to discuss her brother's death." The man's expression didn't change, but something flickered in his eyes, recognition, perhaps, or surprise that she'd be foolish enough to walk into the lion's den. "Wait here." He disappeared into the back. Alex stood in the entrance, acutely aware of the wire pressed against her skin, of the panic button on her jacket, and of Matthias somewhere outside in a car with a gun and a willingness to die protecting her. The maitre d' returned. "Don Greco will see you. Follow me." They moved through the restaurant, past tables where men in expensive suits ate breakfast and conducted business, past a kitchen where chefs worked with a precision that suggested they were well aware of their employer's reputation. They passed through a private door and into a section of the building that tourists never saw. The hallway was lined with elegant artwork and had thick carpet that muffled footsteps, creating a space designed to make people feel simultaneously privileged and trapped. A door at the end opened. The maitre d' gestured. "He's waiting." Alex stepped inside. The door closed behind her with a soft click that sounded like a cell door locking. The room was opulent, with dark wood paneling, a crackling fireplace despite the summer heat, and leather chairs arranged around a table set for two. And at the head of the table, sitting like a king holding court, was Don Greco. He looked exactly like the man from the security footage, silver hair, sharp features, and eyes that assessed her with the casual calculation of someone who'd spent decades determining the value of human life. He wore a suit that probably cost more than Alex had made in 5 years, and his hands were clean and manicured, the same hands that had personally ended her brother's life. "Miss Madison." His voice was refined, almost pleasant. "I've been expecting you. Please sit. We have much to discuss." Alex moved to the chair across from him, sat with her spine straight and her hands folded in her lap, the wire pressed against her skin, recording, storing, preserving every word. "You wanted to discuss your brother." Don Greco poured wine into 2 glasses. A tragedy, his death. Such a promising young man, so dedicated to his work. It's rare to find that kind of passion anymore. "You killed him." The words were flat, devoid of emotion. "In a parking garage, 8 months after he tried to make a deal with your son." Don Greco smiled, a chillingly benign expression. "I see you've been doing your homework. That's commendable. I appreciate thoroughness. It's a quality your brother also possessed. Unfortunately, thoroughness without wisdom is just arrogance in disguise. He came to you for protection." "He came to my son for protection because he thought Matthias was weak enough to be manipulated, soft enough to believe that exposing corruption was more important than family loyalty." Don Greco sipped his wine, his eyes never leaving hers. Noah was mistaken. Matthias may have his doubts, may have philosophical objections to how we conduct business, but he's still my son, still a Greco, and Grecos don't betray their blood. So you intercepted the deal. I eliminated a problem before it could metastasize. He leaned back in his chair, his gaze unwavering. Your brother possessed evidence of financial connections between my family and Senator Russo's political operations, evidence of how we've utilized Costa Syndicate resources to maintain control over New York's infrastructure, evidence that, if published, would have destabilized decades of meticulously constructed alliances. Evidence that proved you're a criminal. Evidence that proved I'm successful. His correction was gentle, almost paternal. There's a distinction, Miss Madison. Criminals get caught. I've operated for 40 years without a single conviction, without even a credible investigation. That's not crime. That's empire building. Alex's hands threatened to tremble. She forced them to remain still, her knuckles white. You murdered my brother because he threatened your empire. I eliminated a liability because your brother didn't understand how power works. He believed information was leverage, that he could negotiate with me as an equal, that offering to exchange his research for protection made him valuable. Don Greco's expression hardened, his eyes glinting with a predatory light. But information is only valuable if its possessor has the power to wield it. Your brother possessed documentation. I possessed an organization capable of making him disappear. We were never negotiating from equal positions. You shot him in cold blood. I executed a threat to my family's survival. There's a difference. He leaned forward, his voice dropping to a low, menacing murmur. Your brother intended to publish his research. He had deadlines, editors waiting. He thought pressure would force me to cooperate. Instead, it forced me to act. 3 months after our meeting, his car went off a bridge. Unfortunate accident, too much alcohol, wet roads, mechanical failure. The investigation uncovered no evidence of foul play because you controlled the investigation. Because I control everything that matters in this city. His tone was devoid of boasting, merely a statement of fact. The police commissioner reports to me, the mayor owes me favors, and the federal judges who would hear any case against me are on my payroll. Your brother believed he could fight that with journalism, with truth, with moral superiority. He was naive. The Wire was diligently recording every word, every casual admission of murder and corruption, every piece of evidence that would damn Don Greco in any honest court. But Alex barely registered it because sitting across from her brother's killer, listening to him nonchalantly recount Noah's death, as if it were a mere business transaction, something inside her snapped. All the careful control, all the 5 years of holding herself together through sheer force of will, all of it shattered into a blinding rage that felt like a slow, agonizing death. Her hand instinctively moved toward the panic button, not to press it, but simply to reassure herself that it was there, that Matthias was close, that backup existed should she need it. Don Greco noticed the subtle movement, his eyes following her every gesture. Ah, you're wired. I wondered if you'd be foolish enough to try that. He gestured casually. 2 men materialized from the shadows, emerging from corners that Alex hadn't even noticed. Bodyguards, armed, professional. They moved toward her with the practiced efficiency of those who'd done this countless times before. Don't. Alex's voice remained steady despite her racing heart. You touch me, and Matthias Greco will bring this entire building down around you. My son is currently sitting outside in a disguise he thinks I won't recognize. Don Greco smiled, his expression tinged with amusement. I've known he was there since the moment he parked. I've known about this entire operation since you walked into Il Santorio last night. Did you really believe you could outmaneuver me? That you and my disappointing heir could topple an empire I've spent 40 years building? The bodyguards reached her, their movements swift and efficient. Professional hands located the wire, ripped it free, and crushed it under a heel. They found the panic button, removed it, and patted her down for additional devices with clinical precision. Nothing else, one of them reported. Good. Don Greco stood, his movements exuding an aura of effortless dominance. Miss Madison, allow me to elucidate something your brother never grasped. Power isn't about possessing the most information. It's about wielding the most control. You and Matthias deluded yourselves into believing you were hunting me, but I've been 3 steps ahead since the moment you decided to play hero at my son's engagement dinner." He moved to the window, his gaze fixed on the street below. Outside, the scene appeared normal, with morning traffic and pedestrians going about their daily routines, oblivious to the impending violence. "I wanted Matthias tested, wanted to see if he was strong enough to survive an assassination attempt, wanted to know if he'd choose family or weakness when the moment arrived." Don Greco's reflection watched her from the glass, his eyes cold and calculating. "Valentina Russo was my idea. The engagement, the dinner, all of it meticulously orchestrated to force my son into becoming the man I need him to be, by having him murdered, by giving him an enemy to destroy, a betrayal to overcome, a fire to temper him into something useful." He turned back to face her, his expression devoid of warmth. "But then you interfered. You warned him, you survived when you should have been collateral damage, and worst of all, you made him feel something besides ambition and rage, made him believe he could be something besides his father's weapon. I made him realize he doesn't have to be you. No, you made him weak." Don Greco's voice dropped to a chillingly low register. "And I can't have a weak heir, can't build a dynasty on a man who'd choose a woman over his family's survival. So, I adjusted my plans, let him think he was hunting me, let him believe he could gather evidence and expose corruption, let him fall for you so I could use you against him." Alex's throat constricted, fear gripping her heart. "I'm bait. Your motivation." He smiled, a cruel, humorless expression. "Because in approximately 10 minutes, my people are going to deliver you to a location where Matthias will be forced to make a choice. Save you or save himself, kill me or let you die, embrace his birthright or cling to the fantasy that he can be something better than his breeding. He'll choose me. I know he will." Don Greco's expression momentarily softened, revealing something that might have been regret in a man capable of such an emotion. "And that's why I'll have to kill you both. Because a son who'd sacrifice his empire for love is useless to me. Better to start over, to build something new with someone who understands that power requires sacrifice." He gestured to the bodyguards. They seized Alex's arms. She fought instinctively, but they were professionals, stronger, better trained. They lifted her as if she weighed nothing and dragged her toward a door she hadn't noticed before, hidden seamlessly in the paneling, leading to a place where she knew she wouldn't survive. "My son will come for you," Don Greco's voice echoed behind her. "He'll bring weapons and rage and whatever remnants of honor he's clinging to. And when he does, I'll show him what happens to Grecos who forget that family is everything, that loyalty is absolute, that weakness gets you killed." They dragged her through the hidden door, down a narrow staircase that descended into darkness, into the kind of basement where screams went unheard and bodies disappeared without a trace. And somewhere above, in a car parked outside, Matthias Greco was realizing that his father had always been hunting him. The black hood came off, and Alex found herself in a room that reeked of blood and bleach. Her eyes struggled to adjust to the buzzing fluorescent lights, the kind that seemed to vibrate right through your skull, making your teeth ache. Concrete walls, a metal table, a chair bolted to the floor where they'd strapped her wrists and ankles. Every cliché from crime shows, brought to life in a space built specifically for this kind of horror. 2 guards stood watch by the door, different from the goons who'd snatched her upstairs. These guys had the hollow eyes of people who'd seen too much, done too much, until the terrible things didn't even register anymore. Just another day at the office, serving Don Greco's empire. Time ticked by, an eternity that she couldn't measure. Long enough for her shoulders to scream in protest from being held in that position. Long enough for thirst to turn her throat into a desert of sandpaper. Long enough for the realization to sink in that making her wait was part of their psychological game. Then the door swung open, and Valentina Russo glided in. Immaculate. A cream-colored dress. Not a hair out of place. Makeup perfect. The kind of woman who belonged at fancy charity events and schmoozing at political fundraisers, not in a torture chamber. But the gun in her hand suggested she was equally at home in both worlds. "You should have run," Valentina said, her voice laced with genuine curiosity. "That night at Il Santorio, when you saw what was coming, you should have grabbed the chance and disappeared. Instead, you warned Mattia." "Why?" Alex kept silent. Years of survival had taught her that engaging gave them power. Silence was her armor. Valentina moved closer, her eyes cold. I've been doing my homework on you. Alex Madison? Or should I say Alexandra Jordan Madison? Age 28, former journalism major at Columbia until your brother died. Then you vanished, new name, new identity, a whole new life built on being invisible. She traced the gun barrel along Alex's cheek, a cruel caress. 5 years in hiding, 5 years running from shadows. Must have been exhausting. Valentina's smile was sharp as a knife. Not as exhausting as pretending to love a man you were ordered to kill. I wasn't pretending, Alex replied evenly. I genuinely liked Mattia. Valentina scoffed. He's intelligent, attractive. Has that whole tortured prince trying to escape his father's shadow thing that some women find irresistible. Under different circumstances I might have actually married him, but you tried to kill him instead. I followed orders, Alex said, her voice flat. There's a difference. Valentina perched on the edge of the table, radiating an unsettling calm. My family has been allied with the Grecos for 3 generations. My father and Don Greco built this city's power structure together. Shared resources, divided territory, created something bigger than either family could have alone. But lately, Mattia has been a problem, asking questions, suggesting changes, talking about going legitimate like that's something crime families actually do. So Don Greco ordered his own son's death, Alex stated. Not death, Valentina corrected gently. Transformation. The attack at Il Santorio was supposed to fail. Mattia was supposed to survive and realize that mercy is weakness, that the old ways exist because they work, that trying to be better than your breeding just gets you killed. But then you interfered. You gave him hope that fighting his father was possible, that an alliance with the right person could change his destiny. I showed him the truth about who Don Greco really is, Alex countered. You made him weak, Valentina spat. Valentina stood, her face hard. And weakness in an heir is a disease that spreads. First, it's ethical objections to how business is conducted. Then it's questioning the family's methods. Eventually, it's full betrayal, turning evidence over to the authorities, dismantling decades of carefully constructed power. Don Greco couldn't allow that. Alex tested her restraints, pulling against them. The chair didn't budge. So this is about motivating Mattia to embrace his father's legacy. This is natural selection. Valentina checked her watch, her expression cold. In 5 minutes, Mattia will receive your location. He'll come charging in with whatever half-baked rescue plan he's cooked up. Don Greco will give him a choice. Kill you himself to prove his loyalty, or watch his father do it while he realizes he's not strong enough to stop it. Either way, you die. The only question is whether Mattia survives the lesson. He'll kill Don Greco, Alex said, her voice certain. The moment he gets the chance, you've underestimated what he's willing to sacrifice. Have we? Valentina's smile widened. A chilling thing to see. Because from where I'm standing, you're the only leverage that matters. Matthias has spent his entire life trying to earn his father's approval, while simultaneously hating everything the man represents. He's torn between duty and desire, between being the heir and being his own man. You made him believe he could have both, that he could inherit the empire and transform it into something clean. He can, Alex insisted. No, he can't, Valentina said, shaking her head slowly. Because empires built on blood stay bloody. You can't wash away 40 years of violence with good intentions. She moved toward the door, her hand resting on the handle. I almost feel sorry for you. You seem like a decent person. Smart, brave. Exactly the kind of woman who'd save a stranger because it was the right thing to do. But decent people don't survive in our world. They get used, broken, discarded. By morning, you'll just be another body in Don Greco's ledger. The door closed behind her with a soft click. The lock snicked into place. The guards resumed their positions, stone-faced and silent. Alex sat in the heavy silence and thought about Noah, about whether he'd felt this kind of fear in his final moments, whether he'd known death was coming, or if Don Greco's bullet had been a surprise, whether dying knowing you'd fought for truth was comfort, or just another way of acknowledging defeat. Her wrists were bleeding where the restraints dug into her skin. Her shoulders screamed from being held in that awkward position, but her mind stayed sharp, calculating, looking for angles. The room had one door, two guards, concrete walls that wouldn't break. But the ceiling was drop tile, old construction, the kind that might have crawl spaces above it. Not much of a plan, but something was better than waiting for death. She started working the restraints. Small movements that the guards wouldn't notice, testing which direction offered the most give. Feeling for any weakness in the metal, the bolts, the chair's construction. Minutes crawled by, each one an eternity. Her hands went numb. Blood made the restraints slippery, but slowly, impossibly slowly, she felt something shift. Then the lights went out. Emergency lighting flickered on half a second later, bathing everything in a dim red glow that turned the room the color of arterial spray. The guards moved immediately, one to the door, one toward her, both drawing their weapons. An explosion somewhere above shook dust from the ceiling. Gunfire followed, then the sound of something large and heavy hitting the ground. Mafia had arrived. The guard nearest Alex made a mistake. He came close to check her restraints, close enough that when she swung her head forward with every ounce of strength she possessed, her forehead connected with his nose with a crunch that felt like victory and sounded like breaking cartilage. He staggered back, momentarily stunned. She yanked hard on the restraints and felt the bolt in the chair give way. Her right hand came free. She grabbed the guard's weapon as he fell, her fingers closing around metal still warm from his grip. The second guard was already turning, already raising his gun, already squeezing the trigger. Alex threw herself sideways, the chair still attached to her left wrist and both ankles, crashing to the floor with her. The bullet sparked off the concrete where her head had been a second before. She fired blind, 3 shots that went wide, but bought her precious seconds. The guard dove for cover behind the metal table. She used those seconds to yank at the remaining restraints, feeling skin tear, not caring, needing mobility more than she needed the blood staying inside her body. The bolt on her left wrist gave. Then her ankles. She rolled behind an overturned shelf as return fire chewed through the space she'd just occupied. The emergency lighting made everything shadows and red illumination, made depth perception a guessing game, made every movement feel like gambling with death. The door burst open. Marco appeared, weapon drawn, face grim. He fired twice. The guard behind the table went down. Then Marco was pulling Alex to her feet, pressing a knife into her hand. Matthias is upstairs, fighting his way through to Don Greco's office. His voice was clipped, professional. "You need to move now." "How many?" Alex asked. "Too many," Marco replied grimly. Don Greco had reinforcements waiting. This whole thing was a trap. He pushed her toward the door. "Go. I'll cover your exit." They moved into a hallway that looked like a war zone. Bodies on the ground. Blood smeared on the walls. The sharp, chemical smell of gunfire hanging in the air. A metallic taste of violence coating her tongue. Somewhere above, more explosions rocked the building, shaking it like it was coming apart at the seams. Alex followed Marco through corridors that twisted and turned in ways designed to disorient, past rooms she didn't want to think about, rooms whose purpose was made all too clear by the dark, wet stains coating the floor. Her bare feet left bloody prints. Her head rang from where she'd headbutt the guard. Her hands shook with adrenaline and fear and the terrible exhilaration of still being alive. They emerged into what had been the restaurant's kitchen. Now it was a combat zone. Overturned equipment, shattered glass everywhere. 3 bodies in Greco family colors and 2 in Russo colors. The war between families playing out in real time with kitchen knives and bullets. "Through there," Marco said, pointing to a door. "Service stairs. They'll take you to the main level. Find Mafia. Get him out. This building's coming down." "What about you?" Alex asked, fear twisting in her stomach. "I'm buying you time," Marco said, checking his weapon. "Tell Mafia. Tell him Antonio would be proud." Then he was gone, moving back toward the sounds of gunfire with the kind of courage that came from having something worth dying for. Alex ran up the service stairs, her lungs burning, her feet leaving blood trails. Every step was a prayer that she'd reach Mafia before Don Greco did whatever he'd planned as his final lesson. She emerged into the restaurant's main level. The elegant space she'd walked through just an hour ago was now a scene of utter destruction. Tables overturned, chandeliers shattered, the beautiful artwork riddled with bullet holes, bodies scattered like broken dolls, Greco soldiers, Russo soldiers, people whose only crime was eating breakfast in the wrong place at the wrong time. And at the far end, through the smoke and chaos, she saw him. Matthias stood before a set of double doors that probably led to Don Greco's private office. His disguise was gone. His face was set in hard lines of absolute determination. Blood streaked his jacket, his or someone else's. Alex couldn't tell. He held a gun in one hand and something that looked like an explosive device in the other. "Mattia!" Alex called out, her voice cutting through the noise. He turned, his head snapping toward her. Relief flashed across his face for half a second before his mask of control slammed back down. "Alex, you need to get out now. This building is coming down." "I know, Marco told me," she said, her voice tight. She crossed to him, stepping over debris and bodies and the shattered remnants of the morning. "We leave together or not at all." "My father's inside," he said, his voice flat. "This ends today. I'm not walking away while he's still breathing." "Then we end it together," Alex said, her voice firm. She took his free hand, her grip strong. "Like we agreed. For Noah, for Antonio, for everyone." The double doors exploded outward, splintering into fragments that rained down around them. Don Greco emerged through the smoke and shattered wood like a demon summoned from fire. He looked untouched, immaculate, his suit still perfect, his expression carrying that same cold assessment it always did. Behind him, Valentina Russo appeared, a cruel smile playing on her lips. And behind her, men in tactical gear, professional killers, the kind of backup that suggested this confrontation had been orchestrated as carefully as everything else Don Greco did. "My son." Don Greco's voice carried across the ruined restaurant, his tone laced with disappointment. "You've made quite a mess. This building's been in the family for 40 years. Your grandfather opened this restaurant with money from our first successful operation. And you're burning it down for what? A woman you've known for less than a day?" "I'm burning it down because it's built on corpses," Mattia said, raising his gun. "Because every brick represents someone you killed, or corrupted, or destroyed. Because I'm tired of pretending that legacy matters more than morality." "Morality," Don Greco scoffed. "The last refuge of the weak. Your mentor Antonio used that word too, right before I put a bullet in his head. Did you know he begged at the end? All his philosophies about honor and legitimate business died the moment he realized I was going to kill him. He reverted to pure animal survival instinct, just like you will." "I'm not Antonio," Mattia said, his voice steady. "And I'm not you. I'm the thing that happens when your teachings collide with your failures. When the son you raised to be ruthless realizes that ruthlessness can cut both ways." "Then prove it," Don Greco challenged, spreading his arms wide. "Shoot me. End this. Show me you have the strength to kill your own father. Show me you're capable of the violence necessary to hold this empire together." Matthias's finger tightened on the trigger. "But first," Don Greco continued, his voice cold, "let me show you what that violence costs." He nodded to Valentina. She raised her weapon and fired. The bullet took Alex in the shoulder. She felt the impact before the pain, a sledgehammer blow that spun her sideways. Then her nervous system caught up, and agony exploded through her body like lightning made solid. She hit the ground hard. Blood spread across the floor beneath her, staining the ruined tiles. Her vision blurred through the haze. She saw Mattia's face transform from controlled fury into something primal, something that looked like grief weaponized. Now Don Greco's voice came from very far away. "Make your choice, my son. Kill me and she bleeds out while you do. Or drop your weapon and beg me to call a doctor. Either way, you lose. Either way, you learn that love is the weakness that gets everyone killed." Alex tried to speak, tried to tell Mattia to shoot, to finish it, to not let her death be meaningless. But her voice wouldn't work. Her body felt like it was made of ice and fire and pain. Mattia looked at her. Their eyes met. And in that moment, Alex saw his decision crystallize. Saw him understand the same truth she'd learned 5 years ago when Noah died. Sometimes survival meant sacrifice, and sometimes the only way to win was to refuse to play by your enemy's rules. He dropped the gun, raised the explosive device he'd been holding, and smiled at his father with something that looked like peace. "You taught me that power is control," he said, his voice steady. "That the man who cares about nothing is the man who wins. That emotional attachment is fatal in our world. You were right. So, I'm going to show you what happens when someone finally internalizes that lesson completely." He pressed the trigger. The explosion was smaller than Alex expected, controlled, precise. It took out the support columns beneath Don Greco's feet and nothing else. The floor collapsed. Don Greco fell through smoke and rubble into whatever basement level existed below. Valentina fired at Mattia. He moved with inhuman speed, grabbed Alex, and rolled them both behind an overturned table. Return fire came from somewhere, Salvatore's team, Alex realized, finally reaching them. The tactical gear soldiers engaged. The restaurant became a battlefield once again, a chaotic mess of gunfire and shouting. "Stay with me," Mattia said, his hands pressing against her shoulder, his touch gentle despite the chaos. "Alex, look at me. Stay present." "Did you?" she began, her voice weak. "Did you kill him?" "I don't know," Mattia said, his voice tight. "I don't care. We're leaving now." He lifted her like she weighed nothing, his strength surprising given he'd been fighting for the last hour. "Salvatore, cover us." They moved through smoke and gunfire past bodies and rubble. Mattias's people formed a protective wedge around them. The Russo soldiers fell back under sustained fire. The building groaned around them like a dying animal. They emerged into daylight. The street was chaos. Police sirens wailed in the distance. Civilians ran screaming. The restaurant belching smoke from a dozen broken windows. Mattia kept moving, kept carrying her, kept putting distance between them and the burning building. A car appeared, Salvatore at the wheel. Mattia pushed Alex into the back seat and climbed in after her. The vehicle peeled out before the door fully closed, tires screeching on the asphalt. "Hospital," Alex managed, her voice barely a whisper. "Safe house first," Mattia said, stripping off his jacket and wadded it against her shoulder, pressing down hard. "We go to a hospital and the police get involved. Questions get asked. People die from administrative complications. I have a doctor who won't ask questions. Your father is either dead or will wish he was when I find him." Mattia's voice was like ice. "But right now you're bleeding in my arms, and that's all that matters. Everything else is secondary." Alex's vision was graying at the edges. She tried to focus on his face, on the fear etched there, despite his controlled voice. On the way, his hands shook slightly as they maintained pressure on her wound. "I'm sorry," she mumbled, the words coming out slurred. "I should have been faster, should have seen Valentina's angle." "You survived my father's trap," he said, leaning close, his forehead touching hers. "You survived because you're stronger than anyone I've ever met. So stay strong for 10 more minutes. Just 10 more minutes until we reach the doctor. Can you do that, Noah?" She couldn't finish the thought. Her brother's face swam in her vision. His smile, his laugh, the way he'd always believed that truth mattered more than safety. "Noah would be proud of you," Mattia's voice cracked. "He'd be proud that you finished what he started, that you fought monsters and survived, that you're still here despite everything they did to stop you. So stay here with me. Don't you dare die after everything we've been through." The car sped through streets Alex didn't recognize. Her consciousness flickered in and out, moments of clarity interspersed with darkness. She remembered arriving at a building, being carried upstairs, a room filled with medical equipment, a woman with efficient hands and no questions cutting away her shirt, the sharp pain of a needle, someone saying the bullet went through clean, missed the bone. She'll live if we control the bleeding. She remembered Mattia's hand holding hers through all of it, never letting go, anchoring her to consciousness through sheer force of will. She remembered waking in a bed that wasn't hers. Sunlight streaming through windows that overlooked the city, her shoulder bandaged and throbbing, but no longer bleeding, and Mattia asleep in a chair beside her. His hand still holding hers, his face exhausted and beautiful and marked with a pain that went deeper than physical injury. Alex tried to sit up. Her body protested with a wave of agony that made her gasp. Mattia woke instantly, his eyes finding hers with desperate intensity. "Don't move," he said, his voice rough with sleep and worry. "The doctor said you need 48 hours of rest, minimum. The bullet tore through muscle but missed anything vital. You'll heal, but you need to give your body time." His hand cupped her face, his thumb gently tracing her cheekbone. "How's the pain?" "Manageable," she said. It was a lie, but a necessary one. "Your father is missing," Mattia said, his jaw tight. "The explosion took out the floor, but there's no body. Either he escaped through tunnels I didn't know about, or someone pulled him out before the building collapsed. Police are treating the whole thing as a gang war. Multiple casualties. Both families taking losses. The media is spinning it as traditional organized crime violence. Business as usual in New York. The files, Noah's evidence, already distributed. Salvatore sent copies to the FBI, the State Attorney General, 3 major newspapers, and a dozen international news organizations. By tonight, every transaction will be public, every connection exposed. Every corrupt politician will be answering questions they can't lie their way out of. He smiled grimly. "We may not have killed my father, but we destroyed his empire. That's something." Alex closed her eyes, feeling the weight of 5 years lift slightly. Noah would have wanted it this way. Evidence and exposure rather than just violence. "Your brother was smarter than me," Mattia said softly, his thumb tracing her cheekbone. "I wanted blood. Wanted to kill my father with my own hands. Wanted revenge to be personal and immediate. But you showed me a better way, a way that burns down the system instead of just one man." "I didn't show you anything," Alex said, opening her eyes to meet his. "You chose it yourself." "I chose you," Mattia said, his voice dropping. "When my father gave me that ultimatum, shoot him while you bled out, or save you, I chose you. I broke 40 years of conditioning, decades of teaching that loyalty to family was absolute. I chose a woman I'd known for a day over the empire I'd been raised to inherit. Does that make me weak?" "It makes you human," Alex said, her voice soft. "Something your father forgot how to be." Mattia leaned in, kissing her forehead, her temple, her lips, with aching gentleness, like she was something precious and fragile instead of someone who had just survived bullets and blood. "The FBI raided Senator Russo's office 2 hours ago," he said, his voice staying soft against her skin. "They found evidence connecting him to 14 political assassinations over 20 years. He's in custody. Valentina's gone underground. The Costa syndicates are scrambling to cut their losses. And every major crime family in the city is trying to figure out what happens now that the old structures have collapsed." "What does happen?" Alex asked. "I don't know," Mattia admitted, pulling back enough to meet her eyes. "I could try to seize power, use the chaos to establish myself as the new dawn, rebuild my father's empire with different principles, or I could walk away, liquidate the family assets, use the money to fund legitimate businesses and philanthropic ventures, become the man Antonio thought I could be." "What do you want?" Alex asked, searching his face. "I want to watch the sunrise without calculating which enemies might attack during daylight," Mattia said, his honesty brutal. "I want to cook pasta without wondering if it's poisoned. I want to sleep beside you without expecting assassins to come through the door. I want a life that isn't measured in body counts and betrayals." That's not the life you've been trained for," Alex pointed out. "No, but it's the life I'm choosing anyway," Mattia said, a new firmness in his voice. He stood and moved to the window. The city sprawled below them, Manhattan bathed in afternoon light, beautiful and terrible and completely indifferent to the violence that had shaped it. "The Greco family is finished," Mattia said, his voice quiet. "Whether my father survived or not doesn't matter. His empire is exposed, his alliances broken, his carefully constructed power structure dismantled. I could try to salvage something from the ruins, or I could let it burn." "And the people who worked for him?" Alex asked. "The soldiers, the associates, everyone whose livelihood depended on the family business? I've set up a fund, legitimate businesses they can transition into, job training, educational opportunities, an exit strategy for anyone who wants out of this life," Mattia said, turning back to her. "Some will take it, some won't. Some will try to kill me for destroying what they thought was their future. But I can't control that. I can only control my own choices. Alex watched him, this man who'd been raised as a weapon and was trying to become something gentler, who'd lost everything, father, empire, identity, and was somehow still standing, who looked at her like she was the only thing in the world worth protecting. "What about us?" Alex asked, her voice coming out smaller than intended. "What happens to the Waitress and the Mafia heir after the war ends?" "That depends," Madia said, moving back to her bedside and sitting carefully on the edge of the mattress. "Are you still interested in finishing your brother's work? Because there are a dozen other. The corrupt families we could expose. 100 political connections just begging to be investigated. Years of painstaking work, turning over every stone and documenting the things that slithered out. That sounds pretty damn dangerous." "Absolutely. We'd be making enemies left and right. Probably be dodging bullets on the regular. We'd definitely be looking over our shoulders for the rest of our lives." His mouth quirked, almost like he was going to smile. "But we'd be in this together, you know? And we'd be fighting for something that actually mattered. That seems like it'd be enough." Alex reached up with her good arm, pulled him down, and kissed him. The kiss tasted like blood and smoke, and that desperate kind of hope that comes from surviving the unsurvivable. When they finally broke apart, she whispered against his mouth. "Noah spent his entire life trying to expose corruption all by himself. And it got him killed. Maybe if we do it together, we'll actually succeed. Or maybe we'll die trying." Madia's forehead rested against hers. "Either way, we're going down swinging." 3 months later, Alex stood at Noah's grave in a cemetery in Queens. The headstone was simple, just his name, his birth and death dates, and a quote he'd always loved. "The arc of the moral universe is long, but it bends toward justice." She laid a single white rose on the ground. The morning was cool and clear, the kind of day that almost made New York feel peaceful, even with all the chaos simmering just beneath the surface. "I finished it." She spoke to the granite stone like Noah could actually hear her. "Your investigation, your evidence, everything you died protecting. Senator Russo's awaiting trial. 16 other politicians have been indicted. The Costa Syndicate's operations here in New York are crippled. And Don Greco, wherever he is, his empire's nothing but ashes now." Footsteps approached. She didn't even turn around. She knew the sound of Madia's gait by now. The way he moved, like contained violence in a suit, even when he was trying his hardest to be gentle. He stood beside her in silence for a moment. Then he placed something on the headstone. His father's signet ring, the symbol of the Greco family. Heavy gold, engraved with the family crest. "I found this in the ruins of the restaurant." His voice was quiet, almost subdued. Proof that he was there when the building came down. The FBI's officially listing him as dead. They never recovered a body, but there was enough evidence to close the case. "You think he's really gone?" "I think monsters don't die easy." Madia's hand found hers, squeezed it gently. "But I also think it doesn't even matter anymore. Dead or just hiding, he's finished. His empire's gone. His legacy's nothing but corruption, documented for all of history. Whether he's still breathing or not, he's lost." Alex squeezed his fingers back. Noah would have appreciated the poetic justice of it all. The son destroying the father's empire with the very evidence the father tried so hard to bury. "Do you think he'd ever forgive me for what my family did to him?" "I think he'd recognize that you're not responsible for your father's sins." She finally looked at Madia, at the man who'd saved her life and destroyed his own legacy, and was somehow still figuring out how to be a decent human being. "He'd see what I see. Someone trying to build something better out of all the ruins." Madia opened a small velvet box. Inside was a ring, a simple silver band, engraved with a rose. "I know it's fast. I know we met under the worst possible circumstances. I know that, logically speaking, we barely even know each other. But I've never been more certain of anything in my entire life. I don't want to own you, Alex. I don't want to possess you. I want to build something clean with you. Something your brother would recognize as worth dying for." Alex stared at the ring, then at the man offering it, at the choice laid out before her, the choice between safety and the kind of dangerous love that could transform everything. She thought about Noah, about 5 long years of hiding, about the woman she used to be and the woman she had become, about walking into Illinario as invisible help and walking out as someone who'd burned entire empires to the ground. I thought you'd never ask. Her voice came out thick with emotion. He slipped the ring onto her finger. It fit perfectly, like it had been made specifically for this moment, for this choice, for this life they were about to build from ashes and evidence and a stubborn refusal to let corruption win. They stood at Noah's grave while the morning grew brighter all around them. 2 people who'd started out as enemies and become something indefinable, something that looked like love but tasted like justice, something worth fighting for. The Noah Madison Initiative launches next month. Alex leaned into Mattia's shoulder. Full funding for investigative journalism, protection for whistleblowers, legal support for people exposing corruption. Everything Noah ever wanted to do, we're making it real. And we're doing it together. Mattia kissed the top of her head. No more fighting alone. No more sacrificing ourselves for abstract ideals. We protect each other, and we burn down anyone who tries to stop us. That's very romantic, in a terrifying kind of way. I'm a work in progress. His arms tightened around her. Give me time. Eventually, I might even learn how to be romantic without all the death threats. 6 months after that, they stood on a rooftop garden at sunset. The city spread out before them in a golden shadow. Mattia was actually cooking, following a recipe Antonio had written down years ago. Alex watched him move around their makeshift kitchen with a kind of domestic contentment that would have been impossible to imagine just 1 year before. Do you ever miss it? She asked. The power, the fear, the empire. Only when it's too quiet. He added some herbs to whatever was simmering on the portable stove. Only when I forget what it actually costs to walk away from all of that. Then I look at you, and I remember that some things are worth more than empires. That's definitely growth. She moved to him, slipped her arms around his waist. The Mattia I met would never have admitted that. The Mattia you met was dying by inches and calling it strength. He turned in her embrace. You showed me the difference between just surviving and actually living, between power and peace, between being my father's weapon and being my own man. I didn't show you anything. You chose it. I chose you. His lips found hers. Every day, every moment, every time the old life tries to pull me back, I choose you instead. They ate dinner as the sun set, talked about the latest exposes from the initiative, about all the politicians scrambling to distance themselves from the Greco-Russo scandal, about the 3 other crime families they'd quietly begun investigating, about building something that actually mattered from the ruins of what had been. Later, in the dark warmth of their bed, Alex traced the scars on Mattia's chest. Each one a story, each one a lesson in survival, each one proof that he'd lived through things that should have killed him. Do you think this is what Noah wanted? She whispered. When he started investigating, did he ever imagine something like this? I think he just wanted the truth to matter more than power. Mattia's fingers threaded through her hair. He wanted a world where corruption couldn't hide behind money and connections, where justice actually meant something beyond whatever the powerful decided it meant. We're building that, one investigation at a time, one exposed politician at a time, one dismantled crime family at a time. The slow work, the best things always are. He pulled her closer. Fast burns hot and dies quick. We're building something meant to outlast us. Something that'll still be fighting corruption long after we're gone. That's worth being patient for. Alex closed her eyes. Just let herself feel the warmth of him. The steady beat of his heart. The peace that came from choosing each other despite everything that said they shouldn't. Once, she'd whispered for him to run. Now, they walked together toward a life they'd built from ashes and evidence and a stubborn love that refused to quit. Because sometimes the sweetest revenge was peace. Sometimes the greatest victory was surviving long enough to see your enemies fall. Sometimes the best way to honor the dead was by living fiercely in the light they died trying to create. Alex thought about Noah, about what he'd say if he could see her now, married to a reformed crime lord, running an investigative initiative funded by liquidated Mafia assets, fighting the same corruption he died exposing, but doing it with backup and weapons and the kind of dangerous love that transformed everything. She thought he'd approve or at least understand that the work wasn't finished, might never be finished. There would always be more corruption to expose, more powerful people trying to escape consequences, more fights worth having. But for tonight, in the dark warmth of their rooftop sanctuary, Alex just let herself simply be. Let herself exist in this moment of hard-won peace. Let herself love the man beside her without calculating the cost or measuring the risk. Tomorrow they'd go back to war. Tonight they'd remember what they were fighting for. Each other, justice, truth, the belief that some things were worth dying for, and even more worth living for. Outside, New York hummed with life, millions of stories intersecting, millions of choices being made, millions of people living in the spaces between corruption and justice, trying to survive in a city that ate the weak and crowned the ruthless. But on this rooftop, in this moment, two people who'd survived the unsurvivable held each other close and remembered that sometimes, just sometimes, the good guys actually won. Not cleanly, not perfectly, not without scars and blood and sacrifice, but they won. And that had to be enough. It was enough. Thank you for staying until the end. That truly means more than you could possibly know. If this story touched something inside you, please subscribe, like, and tell me what you felt down in the comments. I read every single one of them, because this isn't just about storytelling, it's about connection. And if you're ready for the next journey, don't wander too far. The next story is already waiting in the dark.